Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This video we're going to be covering the topic of remote mount transcooler. The reason I decided to go with this remote mount transcooler was because I don't want to put anything else up front weight wise. I'm not going to be running to the radiator, hopefully keep some lines out of the engine bay. And then also, I feel like this unit will probably do a little better of a job of keeping our transmission cooler, hopefully extending the life. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here's the transmission cooler I'm going to be used. It's from Derale or Derale Performance, however you pronounce that. It is their electrical remote cooler, part number 13700. As you can see, there are the size dimensions of the particular one that I'm using. Some key points that I decided to go with this one were because of the 6AN fitting, 16 pass tube and fins. It did come with the brackets already on this. I know there make some that don't have the bracket on there. And then also, it has the reversible fan on it where you can use it as a pusher or a puller. And it's, as you can see there, it's rated at 650 CFM. So let's jump over here. I'm going to show you where I'm planning to put this in the back and why I'm going to put it there. Okay, so right here on this S10 frame, you can see we have a, I guess, crossbar going across here underneath where the bed will go behind the shock mounts on the frame. And I believe that I'm going to place it right there. And this is my plan. So we'll check it out once I get into the video and see how it lines up everywhere. My plan is to mount it here in the center somewhere about where the spare tire went. And then route the lines over here underneath there through that hole and behind the shock so it's not interfering with anything. And then I'm going to cut it across here and then go over to the fuel tank, over to that side of the frame, similar to where I ran the fuel line if you watched that video on my channel previously, and then up to the transmission underneath the cab from there. Now the reason I'm deciding to go with that route is partially because over here on this side I don't want to have to cut the shock mount onto the frame, and then if I run on the inside I don't want any hoses or lines hanging here next to the rear. And eventually when we get to the point, I'm planning to run an exhaust system underneath the truck. And I'm going to have it come out on this side over here on the passenger side before the rear axle. So let's get some tools. We'll get this mounted up. We'll get these brackets put on here. And we'll start putting this together. Got the transcooler on. And what I did is I put it where the spare tire used to be. And I made these little brackets, as you can see here and here, there, to hang it just to give it a little more space away from that crossbar that's going to cross the frame. Next, what we'll do is get the routing of the hoses and we'll start making some AN lines. So I put my first transmission cooler line on. As you see, there are two fittings there underneath the AN fitting where the line is coming out of the side of the transmission. My reason for putting it on the top is, according to a diagram, which I'll put up here in a second, you'll see that the top indicates that it is a return line from the cooler. And the bottom AN fitting is a feed line coming from the transmission to the cooler. Here's the diagram that I'm talking about. As you see here, it says the top, as I mentioned, is from the cooler, and then the bottom is to the cooler. Now, I'm no expert on this exactly, but according to this picture I found, which I believe it came out of like a 70s Turbo 350 transmission manual, that is the way they state it is. If someone knows differently, please let me know in the comments. But my reason for putting it up here is on the bottom, I'm planning to run the temp gauge in the line there instead of putting it in the pan. Now, there may be some controversy about that as well, but at least that, I'll know how hot the fluid is coming out of the transmission after it's been cycled through the cooler and the hoses. So I'm going to go ahead and route this line back to the back, and then we'll get this other line started, and we'll go from there. So I have both of the lines started from the cooler, and then I actually ran it into the frame rail, as I mentioned. As you see, we ran it over here. Still working on the one, but my plan is to make it detachable with using a union fitting, like I did right here with the fuel line, if you watch that video on my channel. And then, of course, the return line, pretty self-explanatory. The feed line, as I mentioned in the previous part of the video, that will actually be using an inline thermostat from Derale or Derale, however you pronounce that. And in that part, we're going to be using this piece here. You see there's a hole here, and this is for a temp sensor. And what that'll do is once the transmission fluid reaches a certain temperature, it'll allow the fans to kick on and start cooling the fluid down after it passes through the radio with that giant fan. So I'm going to finish routing this hose. We'll get these union fittings on, and then we'll jump to the next piece. Okay, so I had to take the hose off and the fitting to make the other line. But before I did that, I figured I would jump into this and show you a little closer of a detail of what I have for my inline fluid thermostat. Particularly when I got it's 35020. That is the part number for this. As you see, premium inline fluid thermostat. This one comes on at 180 degrees. It is 6 a.m. to 6 a.m., which means it's male and female, which will go into the transcooler and then allow you to adapt your 6 a.m. line to your thermostat fitting. This one also will be turned off at 165. I know this company in particular makes different ones I've seen on the website. I figured this was a good range. It will stay on the lower end of the range of the heat that should be going into a turbo 350 transmission based upon some of the research that I've done. That could be a little too cold, might need a little more heat to run optimally, but we'll figure that out once we get the truck on the road. What you'll get with this particular kit is what you see here in front of me, these three pieces, and then the instructions. So you'll have this fitting I just showed you, and then you'll get this temperature probe that'll screw into this 6 a.m. fitting, and then you'll have the piece for that that'll screw into the probe for your electrical connections. As far as the instructions, pretty self-explanatory. Tells you what you get without it being aluminum. There's your little diagram for the first one. And then for the second piece, this also looks pretty simple. You're going to hook one of these probes for these electrical connections to a 12-volt power source, and then the other line is going to go to your fan, positive hot wire, and then one of the fan wires is going to go to the ground wire. Pretty self-explanatory, nothing too complicated there. Figured I would show you this real quick. This is everything you get with this. There's some more if you want to take a look at that. So that's the temp sensor that I'm using. Like I said, I'll check it out, make sure it's the proper range once I get the truck on the road, see how the transmission does. I imagine it'll probably run a little bit hotter than what they're stating here. But we'll figure that out, of course, hopefully soon. So I'm going to go over here and cut this line, and then we'll put this stuff back on. Okay, so now don't make the same mistakes that I did. This is the part of the video where I'm going to show you what not to do. So I ordered this transmission manifold temperature kit, and basically what you get is some fittings. You don't get that. You get this manifold here, which has an adapter for your transmission temperature probe to go into. Then of course it flows straight on through. Now the problem with that is nothing. The problem I had was obviously I didn't read, and I ordered the wrong size fitting. So I got 6 AN, and I thought that it said 3/8 fitting, but it's a 3/8 outside diameter tube that you can adapt using those. That was my fault. It's nothing on an auto meter. Anyway, for the lower part of the transmission cooler line, we're going to be running into this manifold and mounted in a space away from the transmission, hopefully close to the frame, with the temperature probe for the transmission temperature gauge that we'll be putting in the truck eventually once we get the interior put back in and get all the stuff tidied up towards the end. The next thing I'll show you is something else that's a common mistake, and it's totally on me. Mistake number 2. So ran the lines for the cooler into the frame rail. We have these little spacers on there, and then I realized after I got these on, by the way, those are the union fittings that we'll be using. As you see, they just connect 6 AN line to another 6 AN line. I realized after I did that, at the beginning of the video, I had another roll of AN line in a box, but after I go ahead and cut this one to adapt it to this, I'm not going to have enough line left or enough fittings now to run it back to the bottom port on the transmission. So that's going to end up being the end of this video for now. We'll touch base in the next video, so make sure you come back and watch us again. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you'll know when we come back to finish this if you're interested in this topic. And we'll finally wrap this up, and hopefully I can show you how to mount that up there. But this is what we've done so far. We've mounted it to the front top port on the transmission. This is the line coming from there, and we're going to connect it to here once I get some more fittings. And of course, this would happen over a holiday weekend. So of course, Monday, nothing can be shipped out still because all the businesses will be closed. So at some point next week, I'll get the right fittings in, and I'll wrap this up. But that's basically what we've got complete so far. Is everything's wrapped through there, through the frame, into our transmission cooler. We did mount the transmission cooler with these little brackets that I made out of metal just to give it a little more space and airflow. And of course we have our temperature sending unit to turn the fan on. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Do come back because we will finish this, and we'll also maybe combine it into the next video too, so it's not just a sole video and connecting a line to another port. And I'll show you how I end up routing the transmission manifold that I have for the temperature gauge once I get the correct fittings. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks again for watching and supporting the channel. I'll see you next time.